It's about time to get started this morning. So, our class opens up with the word then. Chapter 5, 2 Samuel 5, if everybody will stop talking in the lobby. But so our lesson today, we're split between two places, and this is a false slide. So what happened was Greg Nix got tired of looking at my face on the streaming, and so he put this slide up just so that my face wouldn't cover the whole screen. But we're in 2 Samuel 5 as well as 1 Chronicles 11, 12, and 14. Now, 2 Samuel 5 is just the condensed version of 1 Chronicles. So we'll spend time in both places because there are a few details in 2 Samuel that we don't get in the Chronicles. But chapter 5 of 2 Samuel opens with the word then, okay? Then what? We got to back up and get some of our context, right? So David's king, and he's in Hebron. But not everyone was on board with David being king yet. So Abner, commander of Saul's army, as well as his cousin, made Ishbosheth, Saul's son, king. So Ishbosheth apparently didn't go out to battle because he wasn't killed with the rest of Saul's sons, but he was made king, and he reigned over all the tribes except for Judah for 2 years. And during that time, there were battles, and so the two kings end up going to war against each other. In fact, at one point, it's called the king of Israel versus the king of Hebron. So they come together, or they come to battle, and Abner and Joab meet. During one particular battle, Joab's brother, Asahel, chases after Abner. And in that battle, Abner says, go back, don't come after me. Well, Asahel keeps going after him, and Abner kills him. But then Abner and Ishbosheth have a bit of a falling out over after Saul's concubine who Abner took. And so Abner at that point swore to make David king. And it's interesting that he said that he would do it as God had planned. So Abner sends messengers to David. David agrees to see him under one condition, that Abner brings David's wife to him. Remember, we won't go back into it because we covered that on Wednesday, but David's wife, Michal, who was Saul's daughter, was taken away from him by Saul. And so now David's like, I want my wife back. And under that condition, I'll see you. So Abner does so and meets David. The meeting goes well, and Abner departs in peace. And Abner is going to make David king over all Israel. He's going to bring the tribes together. In fact, by this point, he's already talked to the elders of Israel and kind of started that process of bringing them together. Well, Joab hears of this meeting between Abner and David and that it was peaceful. But Joab has some bad blood with Abner. And so he meets Abner outside of the gate at Hebron and gets close like he's gonna tell him something, and he stabs him and kills him like a criminal. It says in the text, and David says in his lament. So David mourns for Abner, and in fact refuses to eat for a period of time because of it. And then David places a sort of curse, definitely has strong words for Joab and for Abishai, the brothers of Asahel. But then we get to chapter 4, and Baanah and Rechab, in the absence of Abner and in this divide, they go and kill Ishbosheth. They were captains in Saul's army, so they go and kill Ishbosheth in his sleep and bring his head to David, thinking that they'll get good favor with him. Well, they don't know David very well, do they? Because when he gets there, he does not play into their dreams of good favor. In fact, he then has them killed for, as David said, for killing a righteous man. So then we get to chapter 5. We open here, and all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke, saying, "Indeed, we are your bone and your flesh." They weren't saying that just a short time ago when they were battling against him. But here they say, "Here we are, your bone and flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them in. And the Lord said to you, you shall shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over Israel." So the people here are saying, we know that you're supposed to be king. In fact, we've known it for some time. So my question here is, then why didn't they make him king instead of Ishbosheth before? But Abner, commander of the army, had power, had the army under him at this point. So I guess he was seen as the leader who would then either make David king or, as he did, appoint a new king. But they said that you led Israel in and out. How did David lead Israel while Saul was king? Well, David was at one point Saul's armor bearer, right? He went out to battle with Saul against the Philistines, so he led them in and out. But from what we've seen, David was a righteous man that people wanted to follow. So maybe even while he was serving Saul, there were people who saw him as more of a leader than Saul, the king. Yeah, the song, David, Saul was slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Maybe that was part of that preference that they were showing to David even back then. So they said, you've led us in and out. And yes.
In 1 Samuel 18:5, it says that Saul set Daniel over the men of war. So it seems like Daniel had a more leadership role, at least during some period of Saul's reign.
Sure.
With the men of war. So that may be what they're referencing there.
So Mr. Gary said back in 1 Samuel 18, verse 5, that Saul put David over the men. So even Saul had put him in a place of leadership. So maybe David was the face that they routinely saw taking them out to battle and leading them. But in addition, the people say that the Lord said to you, you shall shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over Israel. I wonder how they know that God said this to David. Among David's men, surely this would have been known. You got to wonder if his men then took this message to others and spread it. But it's interesting that God would say, you shall shepherd my people Israel, right? Because where did we find David? He was tending sheep. So we see David is still staying firmly in his roots while being elevated by God. He's still nurturing and protective. When you think about a shepherd and how they care for their flock, who wouldn't want someone like that as king over you? Well, that's what the people had here, a shepherd as king. So he said, therefore all the elders of Israel, verse 3, came to the king at Hebron, And King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. There's a lot more to this that we'll get to over in 1 Chronicles, because there's a bit more detail about the people who were there. But when they do this, they make a covenant and they anoint David. So David's 30 when he becomes king, and king in Hebron. He was king in Hebron for 7.5 years. Then he's king in Jerusalem for about 33 years. Well, he's still in Hebron, so what do we got to do next? We got to get him to Jerusalem, right? So they go and conquer Jerusalem. David says to his men, "Whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain." So we're about to get to how David actually takes Jerusalem, but Jerusalem was not an easy place to take. There's a reason that it became the focal point of Israel and then Judah for so long. It's because it was on a plateau. It had narrow, steep roads leading to it. Jerusalem was an easily defended place. So how did they do it? How did they take Jerusalem? Well, they went up the water shaft. But before this, the Jebusites who inhabited it were pretty confident that they were going to keep it. And so they said, "You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you." Meaning, our weakest people can keep you out of this city. Most of the time, that might have been true. But David had God on his side. But they thought, David cannot come in here. Verse 7, right after that, "Nevertheless, David took the stronghold in Zion." David took the city of Jerusalem. And so David said, the one who goes up this water chute and takes the city, he will be my chief. He will be my commander. And so Joab goes up and takes it. It's kind of interesting that Joab's the one that goes and takes the city, that he's that first one up. Why is that? Well, think about what just happened between Joab and Abner, and then David and Joab. Joab was not very highly esteemed in David's eyes right now. He took his revenge on Abner in the most carnal and cowardly way he could have. There was no remorse, no forgiveness there, as far as we see. So Joab goes and takes the city. Maybe he was doing it to get back in David's good favor. I mean, not only was he one of his mighty men, he was also David's nephew. So, I mean, he didn't want to necessarily be at odds with David for a number of reasons. So Joab took it and became the chief. So then David dwelt in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And then David expanded on it dramatically from where it was. Then the city would be further expanded by Solomon years later. So David went on and became great. The Lord God of hosts was with him. And we're going to stop there and go over to 1 Chronicles and spend some time there. So 1 Chronicles chapter 11, if you'll turn there with me. We're going to we're going to skip over the parts that we've already covered in 1 Samuel. and start talking about these men who were with David, some of which have been with David from the beginning. And it starts in verse 10 by talking about David's mighty men. These were his 30 men who were with him through everything. We're gonna see a few specifically here. In verse 11, we have Jashabim, and he lifted up his spear against 300 and killed them at once. So he killed 300 men at once. And he is among the greatest of the 30. Beside him is Eleazar, and he, also being one of the three, he was with David at Pasdamim. Now, we don't have much about this. There's just a little bit given there. There was a battle with the Philistines, and David's men were set up in a field of barley. There is not much protection, not much cover in a field of barley. But there he stood with David, and God gave them the victory. And for that, among other things, he is considered one of the best. Now, it doesn't talk about who this third of those three is, but then it talks about something they did. So, in a little bit, David is going to go to battle against the Philistines. The Philistines are going to hear that David is king, and the Philistines are going to come out to test him, to meet him in battle. Or maybe test to see if he will come out to battle. Because you think about it, Saul, while he was king, became so preoccupied with David that a lot of the leadership, a lot of his role as king was lost. And so Philistines had taken a great deal of territory during this time. We're going to see that they're actually in Bethlehem. So they're right in the middle of Judah. So this account here, David has gone up, and he wants water from the well at Bethlehem. He says, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." So the three break into the camp of the Philistines and get water from the well and bring it back to him. But nevertheless, verse 18, David would not drink it, but poured it out to the Lord. He said, "Far be it from me, O my God, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of these men who have put their lives in jeopardy? For at the risk of their lives they brought it." Therefore he would not drink it. And this is just one of the things done by these three mighty men. Well, you continue on and you have Abishai. Abishai is considered one of the next three. So it says he could not attain to the level of the first three, but he was the greatest of the next three. He had lifted up his spear against 300 men as well, and was named among them. Then you have Benaiah, who was the son of Jehoiada, and he had done many things as well. It says he had killed 2 lion-like men. You know, throughout the Bible, the power of a lion is practically unmatched by any other creature. In the way it's described and the way it's held up as the epitome of strength. You know, hopefully the ones who were here at the time remember Mr. Steve coming back from Africa after being to the a lion enclosure and watching them attack a carcass. And the video he shared of that and the fear of it, the roar of the lions. The lion is, in description, unmatched among the creatures, except for maybe a bear. but we also know how big and powerful a bear is. Anyway, this man killed 2 lion-like men and a lion. So he was a skilled fighter, and besides that, he killed a giant. He killed this Egyptian who was 5 cubits, or about 7.5 feet tall. But that's not the most impressive thing about this man. He wielded a weaver's beam as, or a spear the size of a weaver's beam. And I think we talked more about that when we talked about Samson, how big that actually is. But he killed this Egyptian, killed the lion and the lion-like men, and he was among this next 3. But he didn't attain to Abishai or to the first 3. And then it goes on to list the rest of David's mighty men. Asahel was the first in that list of the rest of them. But then down the list you also have Beerothite, who was Joab's armor bearer. So even Joab's armor bearer was among the list of the mightiest men. And Uriah the Hittite, who we'll talk about more down the road. But 30 men in all, these with David from the very beginning through all of his fights, all of his struggles. And then we get down into chapter 12. Now, in chapter 12, we get kind of a listing of all of the men who came to David. Some of these came while he was on the run. And that goes back to what the elders said at the beginning of chapter 11, when they said that David was the one leading them in and out. They saw his leadership, saw his faith and his heart, and wanted to follow him even when he wasn't king. So David has been gaining more and more favor with the people, and with that favor has come more men. We see that he gained some Benjamites in verses 3 through 7. And just look through the list, these lists as we're talking about them, because these aren't the men themselves. These are the captains of the men. Now, whether they're captains yet when they come to David, or if they become captains once David's at Hebron, I'm not sure about. But all the men listed here, it says, are captains in one way or another. So several from Benjamin come. Interesting that they come, considering that Saul was from Benjamin. So when they come to him, they're leaving their kinsmen to do it. And they are some of the most proficient fighters in all of Israel. They are ambidextrous. They're throwing slings, shooting bows, fighting with both hands, and very strong fighters. Yes.
One of the things about the Benjamites is that they have a connection to being left-handed, being able to use both of them. Ehud, the judge, is left-handed.
Yep.
So there's that connection you'll see oftentimes in this brought up.
Yeah, over and over again, Cameron says we see Benjamites being left-handed, and that it's often Benjamites who are left-handed, Ehud, among others. But then we see, in addition to Benjamites, Gadites come to David while he's still on the run. And it says in verse 14, these are from the sons of Gad, captains of the army. The least was over 100 and the greatest over 1,000. So again, just showing that these aren't your infantrymen. These aren't your fighters. These are your leaders. And there's a bunch of them. Going down to 16, we have more coming from Benjamin and Judah to David while he was at the stronghold. And then in that particular encounter, David's pretty on edge here. And so he says, "If you have come in peace to me to help me, my heart will be united with you. But if to betray me to my enemies, since there is no wrong in my hands, may the God of our fathers look and bring judgment." So he here says, if you're coming to me in peace, if you're coming to help me, then great. But if not, just know that God is on my side, and he will take care of me. But then Amasai, who became one of the mighty men, he said, "We are yours, O David. We are on your side, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, and peace to your helpers, for your God helps you." So David received and made them captains. So he brought them and put them right into command. And then there's some who come from Manasseh. We briefly talked about that back in 1 Samuel because they came right about the time David was, or while he was with the Philistines. So remember, he goes with Achish up to battle with the Philistines. They're about to go to war against Saul. The other Philistines say, "No, he can't go with us." So he turns back and goes back to Ziklag, where he finds it burned. Well, Manasseh is at this point joined with him, these men, and they go with him to defeat the Amalekites and get their people back. So they aided him there and stayed with him. And it says, verse 22, they came, or for a time, they came to David day by day to help him until it was a great army. So just constantly, David has people pouring in to help him, to aid him. These were the same men who then fought against Ishbosheth's men, against Abner and those men. And among David's men, only 20 perished. They were strong warriors and loyal to David. So then it divides them by tribe, how many men total had come. So from Judah, there were 6,800. And then Simeon, 7,100. Levi, 4,600. Separate from Levi, it says the Aaronites. Based on where they are in the order that they're beside Levi, and the fact that they're listed among the tribes, it's very possible that these are specifically Aaron's line, his lineage. But it says among them there were 3,700. From Benjamin, 3,000. And Benjamin was still split. It says that Benjamin was still split between loyalty to David and loyalty to Saul, and therefore to Ishbosheth. But then Ephraim, 20,800. From half of Manasseh, 18,000. From Issachar, 200 chiefs. So it doesn't say specifically how many men. From Zebulun, 50,000 men. Naphtali, 37,000. The Danites, 28,600. Asher, 40,000. From the eastern tribes, 120,000. Now, I didn't do that math to see how many it came to. This was a great number who had come to David. This was at Hebron. This is not the entirety of Israel. These are the ones who came to him before he was made king in Jerusalem. So these men come, and the rest are in agreement that he should be king and that these men should go up. Because it says that the rest verse 39. They were there with David 3 days, eating and drinking at Hebron, for their brethren had prepared for them. So the ones who didn't come up were sending food to them. Moreover, those who were near to them from far away is Issachar, so not very close at all. Issachar and Zebulun, those are your northern tribes. From Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali were bringing food on donkeys and camels, on mules and oxen, provisions of flour and cakes of figs and cakes of raisins, wine and oil and oxen and sheep abundantly, for there was joy in Israel. Before, when David was made king, there wasn't much joy when he became king. Why? Because Saul, Jonathan, and many Israelites had just died. There was a lot of sadness among the people, and I'm sure there still is, because they just had a civil war among themselves. But it says at the same time there was great joy in Israel. This was David truly becoming king of Israel after having already been king for some time. Well, then they go up and they take Jerusalem, as we've already talked about. And when he's there, then Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers and timber to David for him to build his house. And it says, verse 2, so David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, for his kingdom was highly exalted for the sake of his people Israel. You got to think at first David may have been a little on edge, a little he wasn't necessarily sure that this was his resting place. Why? Because he had been on the run, he had been all over the place, he had been all over Judah and other places, and then when he came to Hebron, he was king there, but he wasn't truly king of Israel. So David gets to Jerusalem. Now he's getting a gift from another king, and he says, now God has established me. Now he has made me king, and this is where I'm going to be. So they built a house for him there. And it says he was highly exalted for the sake of his people Israel. So David took more wives. This is a summary of his children and his wives here, because included in this list there's Solomon, as well as others who won't come into the picture for quite some time. In fact, Bathsheba won't come until a little bit later. So now we get to Philistines testing David. They have a new king, and so they wonder, what is this king going to be like? Is he going to be as great of a leader as he is a fighter? Because they know David's reputation as a fighter, but how is he going to do as king? So they test him. They go raiding in the valley of Rephaim, and David came down, and he inquires of God and asks, shall I go up? And God says, go up, I'll give them to you. So they went up, and David defeated them. But then the Philistines come and raid again. So David says, shall I go up again? And God says, you shall not go after them, but circle around them and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees. This kind of reminds me of when the Israelites took Ai, right? They were defeated the first time when they went up because they had in the camp. But then Joshua inquires of God, and when he does, God gives him his strategy how to approach the city. This reminded me of that, but God says to go in front of the mulberry trees, and when you hear a sound of marching on the tops of the trees, can you imagine standing under those trees and hearing the sound of like soldiers marching on top of them? said, that is when you shall go to battle. For God has gone out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines. So David did as God commanded, and they drove back the army of the Philistines from Gibeon as far as Gezer. And the fame of David went into all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him upon all nations. David is really at the height of his kingdom right here. This is when he's the strongest, most focused both on God and the people, and when he has the most support. We're going to get just a couple of chapters down the road, and that's going to change. He's going to lose the support of his house for sure. His kingdom is going to be, in a sense, divided between him and his son, and he's never going to be the same leader of the people, of his house, physically, spiritually, in any way as he is right now. And in the next couple of chapters. All right. Questions, comments, concerns? I know this class had a lot of names and places. We couldn't really go into it in depth, and there's a lot in those names and those people that we can draw from, but please go back through, read it, use digital resources, concordances, different things to try to make more connections and draw more from these people and these places and how they interact. But we're in an exciting time for David, for his kingdom, and we'll see where the next few classes take us. Thank y'all.